First, I want to discuss a perpetual problem at the FBI, whistleblower protection. Director Mueller has repeatedly assured me that he will not tolerate retaliation against whistleblowers at the FBI. Despite these assurances, two particular whistleblower cases have been dragging on for years. These cases are largely fueled by the FBI's desire to continue appeal rulings and findings of wrongdoing by FBI supervisors. FBI agent Jane Turner filed a whistleblower complaint in 2002 when she discovered FBI agents were removing items from ground zero following 9/11. She faced retaliation for raising concerns about these agents, and her case has been stuck in administrative limbo at Justice Department for over 9 years.
We noted that our private security in Afghanistan appears to be a major source of payoffs to the Taliban. Our report has the first official statement that it's the second largest source of money for the Taliban.
After drugs.
After drugs, that's right.
Classified, the executive branch took all reasonable available steps to ensure that members of Congress were appropriately informed about the programs when they renewed it. I understand that there have been recent proposals to amend Section 215 authority to limit bulk collection of telephone metadata. As the President has said, we welcome a public debate about how best to safeguard both our national security and the privacy of our citizens. Indeed, we will be considering in the coming days and weeks further steps to declassify information and help facilitate that debate, just as we have done this morning in releasing the primary order and the congressional briefing papers. In the meantime, however, we look forward to working with the Congress to determine a careful and a deliberate way that tools can best be structured and secured to secure the nation and at the same time protect our privacy and civil liberties.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think we can. The debate you speak of is starting now. The administration did declassify FISC order. Of course, it does not contain any real legal analysis or discussion of the 215 relevant standards, so that will be part of our questions. But first, I want to ask Deputy Director Inglis a question before we even go into the legality and usefulness of this. We had a huge security breach, I think we'll all agree, committed by Edward Snowden. And a few years ago, Bradley Manning downloaded hundreds of thousands of classified and sensitive documents, passed them on to WikiLeaks. Now, if two data breaches of this magnitude had occurred in the private sector, somebody would have been held accountable by now. There's a lot of material kept in the private sector, trade secrets and so on. If they allowed this kind of leaking to go on in most companies, somebody would be held accountable. Who at the NSA is taking responsibility for allowing this incredibly damaging security breach to occur?
So that accountability must be considered at least two levels. One, at the individual level, we have to take a hard look to see whether individuals exercise their responsibilities appropriately, whether they exercise due diligence in the exercise of those responsibilities.
Well, obviously, there wasn't. I mean, if a 29-year-old school dropout could come in and take out massive amounts of data, it's obvious there weren't adequate controls.
What measures or safeguards are in place to monitor the military personnel, DoD, civilian, private contractors with their security clearances?
If you're talking about, their day-to-day access to classified information, for contractors, DSS does its oversight. From the standpoint of a military service member or a DoD civilian, that is the responsibility of the component head to establish a program to monitor and conduct oversight of their own operations.
Do you know what kind of criteria is used in these cases?
There is a DoD Information Security Program manual, which establishes criteria for not only how classified material is to be protected, but also issues of security concern that need to be reported to the central adjudication facility if there's a concern about an employee.
When we're talking about clearances that are potentially revoked, can you tell me what the biggest disqualifiers are?
Historically, it has been often it's for financial issues and individuals who've been involved in criminal activity.
Okay. How many clearances have been revoked in the last year or two or three?
I would have to come back to you with those specifics.
That'd be good if you could. In a previous question, I think Ms. Schmitz said that USIS was under investigation since late 2011. Did I hear that correct?
Yes, sir.
And they're still under investigation now?
Yes, sir.
Year and a half later? How long do these investigations typically take?
Complicated contract fraud case typically takes several years, yes.
And during that time, there's no, their used business goes on as usual with these contractors, even if they're under investigation?
It depends on the investigation. In this case, Fizz has been aware of what we've been investigating since the beginning. And
Can you tell me what that investigation's about? Can you legally tell me that?
since it's ongoing, sir, I really don't want to risk jeopardizing the
I don't want you
potential
to. I don't want you to. Senator McCaskill, do you have any further questions?
I do, just a couple. I want to get at USIS in terms of not only do they have the big contract to actually, the biggest contract to do the background checks, they also have this program support contract. And these contracts are, one of my nemesis in my job of overseeing contracts. Because all through our government, there have been an easy way to augment personnel by doing these program support contracts. And at one point in time, and probably still at Homeland Security, you couldn't tell the contractors from the employees. They were doing the same functions. They were sitting at the same desks. They were working on the same things. One was a contractor and one wasn't. And partly it was because supposedly they were easier to get rid of if you hire the contractors, and you don't have to have it in the same budget line as you do. Easier to get rid of the contractors, and you don't have it in the same budget line that you do to hire employees. So my question is, why is USIS getting this $45 million a year for program support, and what is that?
Yes, ma'am. USIS, it's one of our primary support contracts. We provide some background to your staff about the costs associated with it. But our front-end operation has a number of routine activities it has to conduct, and much of it is manual based on the way the records come to us in paper style. So we actually have 999 personnel that work the front-end operation for us. That is everything from scoping the investigation, pre-review, inputting the data, and ensuring that the investigation gets distributed to our investigators in the field.
Okay, so we're paying USIS several $100 million a year to do background checks, and we're paying them $45 million a year to do the office work.
Yes,
What
yes, ma'am.
percentage of that 999 are contractors, and what percentage of them are federal employees?
We have oversight. We have 35 personnel that oversight the contract, the support contract itself.
So of the 999, 35 of them are employees and 965 are contract people?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so why? Why are we paying contractors instead of hiring people?
As we add automation, we're able to downsize the staffing. And so year to year, we've seen a decline in the contract staff required for our support services. We also, based on the low-level jobs that they are, it's more financially beneficial for us to have contractors doing that work than bringing on a full-time.
So you have a cost-benefit analysis that you could get to me?
Not one I can give you, no, ma'am.
You don't, because there isn't one?
There is not one.
Okay, well then how do you know they're cheaper?
Well, we'll do a cost-benefit analysis and provide.
Well, it sounds like to me you haven't done one, but yet you said they were cheaper.
Yes, ma'am, because
Well, how do you know that?
we can contract our workforce very quickly on the contract side. So as the automation gets added, we can go ahead and downsize those requirements within.
So you're telling me 999 is downsized?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's lower than it was?
Yes, ma'am.
What was it last year?
It was. I'd have to get that number to you. It's over 1,000, but that's only a
Okay,
different.
well, I'm going to dig in here.
That doesn't look very good to me. and now we're finding out that OPM is probably gonna get on board, or maybe gonna get on board, or is getting on board. What's going on? It looks to me like, quite frankly, that there's a real disconnect here between what the contractors are doing and what the expectations for the contractors to do. And people are dying because of it. We're losing critical information because of it. I mean, the list goes on and on. So what's going on?
Thanks for the question. I am not aware of anyone at OPM saying there was no problem with USIS. I think I do know that because of the fact that this complaint was under seal, we were unable to talk about the complaint. And now we can talk about the complaint, which I think is a good thing. And I think what we have tried to do, as I was explaining to Senator Carper before, was, and this started before the complaint became public, and it's been over the last several years, is to address and to rectify the problems that are revealed in these allegations in this complaint, which was under seal. And as I mentioned, we've done many things at OPM to prevent this from happening again. This is contract fraud, a failure to do quality reviews that they were obligated to do under the contract. And there have been many, many changes made at USIS as well, many changes that involving the whole new staff at the top, compliance office, internal audit, all sorts of things that have given us.
When were those
confidence.
changes made?
Those changes have been made over the last 2 years, since the allegations in the complaint. And we've been working with our IG on it and with the Justice Department. And so we feel that, the allegations are certainly very disturbing. And what we've tried to do is address the underlying concerns without speaking publicly about them.
And so you guys, and I'm not an attorney, but they have been sealed, but you've known what's in the charges. You just can't talk about it publicly. Is that correct?
I can tell you right now, in fact, you can go online probably.
Yeah, I don't care about now. I want to know about July 2011. Were you guys aware of what the charges were?
We knew what were the allegations were in the complaint. However, working with the Justice Department and our IG, we were, advised, of course, not to discuss it because it was a matter of
and that's
seal.
cool. That's fine. I guess the real question here is that USIS does 60% of the background checks, right?
I think it's 50.
50%,
Yeah,
which is
close
there's
enough.
3 companies that do the contracting, so they're doing the lion's share of it.
Yes.
Was there any additional oversight given as of July 1 on the work that they were doing? How often was it done? And by the way, are those kind of metrics used now on all of them? Because quite frankly, when money's involved, obviously there's some folks that don't give a damn about the product and they just want to make the money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. What we've done, and it's not just oversight of USIS, because we have other contractors and we have federal employees, quite frankly, who do the work too. They need to be watched.
So what determines what background checks go to USIS and what goes to do these guys do some things particularly well and other things not so well, or do you just dole them out like a deck of cards, or what?
I don't think it's like a deck of cards, and I actually don't know what I will get an answer to you on that question. I suspect it's based on the location of the investigation, but it's not as though, they do the top secret and the federal staff does it.
And I believe it was you that talked about quality metrics. It might have been Brenda too. What determines what background checks you guys look at to see if they're done appropriately?
We look at all of them. We look at each background investigation.
So you looked at Alexis's background check.
Yes, we did. Well, would you like me to talk about the Alexis?
Well, you can, but the information's out there. The guy, the naval record alone should have brought up some red flags.
Well, what we did.
And what you're saying is 2 folks missed it.
Yeah.
USIS missed it. Well, I don't know if USIS did that one or not, but the contractor mixed it. They did. The contractor missed it, and you guys missed it.
Well, to be clear, I would have to say that based on our own review, and I believe also ODNI's review of the Alexis investigation, yes, we all missed something for sure, but we did what was required.
Multiple somethings.
Well, we OPM. I want to make sure, because it's really important to get to the root cause of this, that we understand what every each part of this. We did the investigation in 2007, and it was for a secret clearance, and there are certain protocols and standards that apply to a secret clearance. It's not a top secret clearance. We conducted the investigation that was required by the investigative standards, And it was, so having gone through quality control, both at USIS and OPM, we would have passed that investigation because it complied with investigative standards. Now, what we're looking at right now in the context of the review and what we have been looking at is, well, are the standards up to snuff? Should we?
Arrest report may be part of the background check. There is not a requirement that the underlying police report be obtained. And I'll tell you why this is a shocking revelation. Like Senator Ayon, I'm a former prosecutor. And the vast majority of cases that would reveal a mental disturbance will not have a disposition. The criminal justice system does a very bad job of adjudicating the mentally ill. Because the mentally ill really, from a prosecutor's standpoint, if they haven't hurt anyone, putting them in prison sometimes creates more problems than it solves. So most prosecutors, when they're confronted with a mentally ill issue, like someone who says they've heard voices, someone where the police has been called to a motel room on a disturbance, where someone says there's microwaves coming through the vents and someone is people are here to get me, they will do a police report, and most of the time the police department won't even try to file charges. That is a disturbance call that is related to someone that in their minds, they do this all the time. Now, that is not something that especially in a city as large as Seattle, or a city as large as Kansas City, or a city as large as St. Louis, that kind of disturbance call, where someone is making a racket because they are mentally disturbed, most police departments won't even take it to the prosecutor for disposition.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I kind of see this as a multitude of problems. I mentioned in my opening statements we overclassify, which is a problem for the American people because that means it's not transparent. And sitting on the intelligence committee, I get to see what is secret and what is top secret, highly classified and compartmentalized. One of the other things I see is in 5 different instances, we have people who are doing the investigations who are also doing the adjudication. So we have an absolute conflict of interest in terms of separating of authorities and responsibilities in 5 areas in the clearance process, 5 separate areas where we have the same person adjudicating, or the same firm adjudicating what was cleared, what was investigated. Third, as we've noted, we have 3 different instances in our very remote history where we've obviously failed in terms of our clearances, whether it's Bradley Manning or what happened here at the Navy Yard or what happened at NSA. We have a failure. And the other thing we have is now we know that we have 8,400 people with clearances that don't follow the law when it comes to paying their taxes. And half of them have a top secret clearance. You know, the American people ought to be asking, what in the world's going on? And so my question is we've now seen outlined who's ultimately responsible for it. That's the DNI, correct? And we have the Defense Department that's making improvements but still has a way to go. And we have failure with contractors and allegedly not doing what they're supposed to do. There's also another IG investigation going on along with that. So what's the answer? One of the answers has to be doing the job that we do better. 1. Number 2, the other has to be is using data that is available. You know, the form, where's that form? This form, for $20, you can get 90% of the information on the internet that's in this form. Now, we pay $2,400 for top secret clearance. Is that right? It's about what we pay. It's about $2,400.
For a top secret, it's more than that. It's a little over $4,000.
Okay, $4,000. What for a secret? What do we pay?
About $262.
Okay, and for $20, you can find out 90% of this stuff online right now. And so the question is maybe we need to step back and say, First of all, we got way too much stuff classified. We got way too many people have to have clearance. Number two, how we're doing it is not utilizing data that's out there today that's readily available. Number three is we've had a response from Director Clapper that they're going to start coordinating with the IRS. Well, that seems, most people would say that's kind of a no-brainer. That'd be one of the things you'd want to check. You have a form. It's in the form, have you paid your taxes? But it looks to me like nobody ever cross-referenced that with the IRS. Nobody ever checked to see if that data was accurate. And all that is a computer check. So I guess my question to you is, and my final point is this, creating the expectation that your clearance is tentative on the basis of you passing some type of renewal and not knowing when that's going to be. The CIA used to have random polygraph tests. They don't even have random polygraph tests now. You're noticed. I can pass any polygraph test with 2 drugs in me, and you won't ever know it.
And I don't mean reported in general terms. In other words, telling the committee, and I'm not saying this is the case, but if you were to tell the committee that you have high confidence that this country, Germany or France or another, would continue its troop commitment in Afghanistan after a certain date, but you don't tell us why you have that high confidence, I wouldn't consider that informing us of something that is a very significant intelligence activity. And I would certainly think an intelligence activity that we undertake that has the potential for the kind of blowback we're seeing today would be something that you would want to report in considerable detail to the committee.
Well, sir, there are many things we do in intelligence that, if revealed, would have the potential for all kinds of blowback.
I don't doubt that, but those are exactly the things that should be reported to the committee, because it's a policy decision ultimately for us to make. Is it worth the risk? Is it worth the risk of that blowback in light of the information that we gather? So I think we have a lot more work to do with you to make sure that we're getting the information we need.
Well, the conduct of intelligence is premised on the notion that we can do it secretly, and we don't count on it being revealed in the newspaper. So that would change the criterion, obviously. And if what we embark on in the way of a collection activity, because of its potential blowback, if revealed publicly, that's a higher threshold, or a lower one, I guess, for providing more notification.
I find it very hard to understand why, if this information was deemed too sensitive to be shared with the Intelligence Committee, it was not so sensitive that it wasn't accessible to a low-level systems analyst like Mr. Snowden. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. Director Alexander, if I could ask you on the metadata program, if you believe that this can be done technologically, that is, move the data to the telecommunications providers, allow them to retain their data, and we can get all the information we need when we have a need to get it, why not undertake that now on your own? Why wait for legislation to require it? Why not go to the FISA court order and say we're going to request instead a program in which we go to the communications providers with a particular number, with a selector, when we have reason to believe it's connected to a plot? And why not announce to the country, we hear you, we're making this restructuring, we can get the information we need, and we can do so in a way that's more protective of the privacy concerns that have been raised.
So the issue would be, in working there right now, and I would ask Mr. Cole to make sure I answer this exactly right, but right now, in terms of, we would have to have a change in statute in order for them to keep it, I believe, at the service provider. So that's where you come in. We couldn't compel them or get them to keep this data, and the courts could not do that. As I understand it with this, did I get that exactly right?
That would be correct. There's no statutory requirement for them to keep it for the length of time that we're looking at, be it either 3 years or 5 years, and we would have to have that as a separate piece of legislation to give us that kind of longevity confidence.
I'm out.